All right, it's time for Yogi and the BeachMan. Hi, I'm Jim the Yogi.
And I'm Rick Beach the BeachMan.
We're two Michigan transplants now living in Southwest Florida.
In fact, we're cousins born in 1964, just a month apart.
I like to meditate.
And I like to play bass in a band.
I'm into chanting Om.
And I'm into throwing down some classic rock.
But together, we're on a mission
to promote people that are helping other people.
We want to make the world a better place.
One conversation at a time.
So sit back,
turn up the volume,
and get ready to laugh.
Because we like to have fun
while we spread the love.
Interviewing lovely people. Yes, we have fun.
Welcome to Yogi and the BeachMan. Today we have Andrea Donnelly here. She's the founder of We Are Here to Remember. She's also the creator of Future Medicine. Can't read my writing. Future Medicine Modality. She's a professional wizard, an ascension guide, and a spiritual guide and mentor. So, Andrea, I'm Jim the Yogi.
I'm Rick Beach, the Beach Man.
Welcome to our show. We're excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me here during these wild times in which we live. I feel like these conversations are, important and cool and just really, really urgently needed.
Yeah, for sure. Please tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, what is a professional, as the things that popped out here is professional wizard. Can you go into a little more?
Yeah, so I have always, from the time I have memories as a baby, felt very connected to my own divinity and, soul spark, creative powers. I've always really believed that all of us are essentially, that we're all creator beings, and that we have, because of conditions down here on this wacky jewel of a planet that might be round, might be flat, who even frickin' knows?
But whatever I have a pretty good idea, but okay.
Whatever is what I have my own ideas about it, but I feel like at the end of the day, what we can know for sure from my perspective, from my own lived experience, is that we have power in our hearts and in our own divine experience that are supernatural. And basically, I call myself, as you mentioned, a professional wizard. I've been super psychic in a variety of different ways since I was a kid, and I work with people to essentially retune the misinformation, the chaos, all of the complex energies that I think are invested in not having people remember that, in essence, whether you're a pro wizard or just a casual man about town with your wizardry skills, that we all have them, and that it's really time now to remember those things about ourselves, to cultivate them, to really reclaim our psychic gifts, our ability to connect both to each other, to the realms of beauty that surround us in so many ways that we can't see in human form. So I took decades of metaphysical study and self-practice and research and study in a variety of different ways. And I created Future Medicine, which is my modality. It's a healing modality, and I used it to heal chronic nerve pain that I had suffered from previously for decades. I was in 4 car accidents and a whole bunch of other things that, essentially created the problems that I was having with my physical body. And I created Future Medicine, which I call a multidimensional healing modality. And it's one thing I love about it is that it both helps people with the physical body, but it's also been really interesting to work with people and see how it does activate, the ancient wisdom that I think we all hold by way of those psychic gifts. So that was a long, hopefully good articulation of what I'm doing.
Yeah, I'm sure Rick has as many questions as I do about it.
I should have been taking some notes on that.
I feel like we stepped into the world of Harry Potter here.
Kinda. No, kind of what I'm in full disclosure, I'm a little more on the skeptical side than Jim is here. But recently, since we've been doing these podcasts, I've kind of really, through meeting a lot of different folks in different walks of lives and professions, and and from hypnotist to now a professional wizard, which is really cool. So I've definitely opened up my mind more than I would have been 6 months ago or so. So, and not to mention, I've actually had witnessed some workings of what you're talking about, maybe in a smaller scale, somewhat recently too. So I'm less skeptical today than I would have been back in March before Jim and I started this deal.
Yeah.
So I'm really want to hear about the medicine aspect of what you're doing and how you're healing people. I'm sure you're not like
What's a
getting things
typical
from
patient?
Pfizer and pushing Pfizer drugs on people or Moderna or any other drugs.
No, and it's kind of funny because while I was going through, the struggles that I had with that previously debilitating nerve pain, I did all kinds of things. I was always working on myself. I was always doing energy work. I was using herbs and flower essences and all kinds of different things. And I also I had a back surgery in 2018. And so there were some ways where I was like in that world of allopathic medicine. I took painkillers, I took things for my nerve pain, and there are some things, I think there are some things about that world, like if you're in a crisis point and you break a limb or you have a really bad accident, those tools can be really good. But I think
for
as
sure.
right, and I know you're not you're not saying that that's not the truth, but I feel like especially for anyone who's more on the skeptical side of the coin, I think just like acknowledging that to me feels important. Like to me it's like I want every tool that I can possibly get my little hands on, that will help me from a multidimensional perspective. And so this healing modality for me, it's energy work. I also do a lot of I integrate both the energy work, which I can do either like in person with people, I can do it virtually, I can do it remotely actually. So I have certain kinds of sessions that I do with people that are not even, that don't even require a call because I can like tap into people's field from a distance. And it's just been really like beautiful and incredible to watch people move through things like recovering, helping receiving support from me as they recover from accidents and injuries, and even people who are physically well, who have worked with me. I've watched people leverage future medicine to build, to shift their relationships, to change the way they show up for themselves, to create all kinds of cool things in their lives, like getting new jobs that actually feel aligned with them, starting their own businesses, growing their businesses. Like, to me, what's cool about future medicine is it really is, it can be applied to, from my perspective, anything that someone is looking to essentially get like a big burst of like energy. And from a healing perspective, I often think it's more about me activating our own innate ability to heal, because I think that's something that we're, to your point about like the pharma, they do not want us to understand our own ability to really change things and to heal in powerful and profound ways that no one that doesn't make money. That's not a to remind people that like we all
the whole deal with big pharma right now, in conjunction with the food industry and frankly the U.S. government, is to keep pharmaceuticals, to put people on pharmaceuticals and keep them there.
Yeah. It's like just like a perpetual cycle.
Yeah, they need their permanent customers, and now that they've managed to have kids and teenagers, over 50% of them be obese and fat and on pre-diabetics. So they've accomplished their goals. They've got an entire 2 or 3 generations now on the pharmaceutical treadmill, and that's just where it's going and will continue to go until people become more aware of alternate ways they can get their medical help, and really what's poisoning them to begin with, and why are we so sick out of the gate.
Yeah, Right.
Well, and you said earlier about, you're always, there are certainly spaces in our society for the Vicodins and the painkillers and stuff like that. I mean, if you get in a car wreck, you break your arm, you break your leg, hip, whatever, you need to go to a doctor, get fixed up and put back together, and you might need something to get over the bridge of that pain. I've been there, you've been there, we've all been there. But I think as a general rule, that at least most of the people I associate with, have totally lost faith in the medical community on the other side of things, on the more not acute, what's the long-term type stuff?
Chronic.
Yeah, on the chronic conditions.
Yeah.
I mean, their entire livelihood just depends on everyone having a chronic condition, and somehow they've managed to figure it out to give us all that.
Well,
so when you find someone like you who can figure it out to solve those issues other ways, whether no matter how it is, it's always a good thing as far as I'm concerned. So
yeah. And you think about, like, I think about this all the time, just like constantly every day. It's a running dialogue in my own brain, just thinking about how hard they come at us from every angle, right? Like our food, our water, the air, the soil is so depleted of nutrients. Like there are just all of these ways from this, like they have to come at us so hard from so many different angles to have essentially created these conditions. And so there's a part of me that, as much as I'm like not here for any of that at this point, and like I really believe that like my purpose, as it were, on this planet is to be like, good people of Earth, it is time to remember that you have like, psychic gifts, you have intuition, you have this innate ability to heal. And, if you are, again, on the more like normal side of the coin, you might be like, what is this wacky bee talking about? And that's okay. But I also think that there's something almost beautiful in a very ironic way, if you think about how hard they do have to come at us to have created this cluster F of chaos, right? When you think, it's like we are creator beings who have infinite wild powers, because if that was, to me, if it wasn't true, then like why are they meddling in like literally every system that exists on this planet in a way that is not good?
Denaturing.
Yeah, they wouldn't need to do any of that if like my perspective wasn't true. I think that's what I think.
Easily take the next hour and we could really dive deep into that subject, because I have my feelings but I don't know if we want to go to the Alex Jones side of things, because we
just lost 5 more users. Listeners.
I sure hope not, because heck, that guy's been right a lot more than he's been wrong about stuff, and that's for damn sure. But they seriously have, and if you get to the root cause of the the obesity crisis in the United States, over half the kids are fat. Yeah. And that's what it is. It's just fat. And why, I don't understand why people just don't take a step back and look at what causes it. And what causes it is the chemicals and the poisons that we're putting in ourselves. Yeah. And more worse, worser, what we're doing to our kids, but they don't tell us that we are. So they brainwash us with tricks, TV ads, and Cookie Crisp on Saturday mornings to our kids who want the pretty colored stuff, and it's full of yellow dye number 5, which is an endocrine disruptor, which causes girls to have puberty at 12 years old and then wonder why things are messed up. And that's really where you have to go back to and start from the bare building blocks in order to get healthy. But once you get messed up, it's good to find someone like you who can maybe help put it back together, no matter whether it comes from, a more psychological aspect or a physical aspect or whatever.
Or the energetic work. Is the energetic work that you're doing Reiki or similar to Reiki?
It is just in terms of like understanding it, it is similar and to Reiki, in that it is essentially like I am, from my perspective, what I really think I'm doing is like actually like channeling whatever the truth about us is.
Okay.
And running that through my own body and transmitting it to people through this future medicine. And I think it does. I could talk about it for like 100 hours, and it's and I can go down like a million rabbit holes. But the way that I sort of perceive it is when I'm working with someone, I call it your energetic bag of rocks, and we all have them. It's a very complicated, like, tapestry of all kinds of different things: trauma from past lives, trauma from this life, the drama, the pain, all of the things that have happened that we're both consciously aware of. And then because I think that our beings are infinite in so many ways, that there's like stuff from parallel lives and other timelines and, past and future and all of these things that get like sort of wrapped into this energetic bag of rocks. And when I work with people, and I think that energetic bag of rocks, as it were, affects our physical health. So as much as the things like you were talking about the dyes and, why corn syrup isn't everything. Like, get the F out of here with corn syrup. Like, there are just all of these things, the GMOs, all of that stuff. Like, there are the physical things that affect our health. And then what I really think my part in this whole, sort of, if I think of each of us on this journey as a puzzle piece in the arc of remembrance and reclaiming our sovereignty as individuals and a collective down here on earth, it's like my part is that I can look at a person or a system or a community. I can like use this lens of perception that I have, where I can look at someone and I can like see, as it were. And by see, I mean like feel and know. And, I get like images and I smell things and I can like see energetic threads. And I basically am shown a person's bag of rocks. And then I use future medicine from that point to clear the energetic effects of that, of your bag of rocks, right? As much as we can whittle it down. Like, it might not be perfect. It might be a journey. It might take some time, but the more each of us can like retune our energetic field and start to clear those things, those hooks, that like baggage from the chaos machine of planet Earth, and really start to just like clean and clear and retune our energy. I almost think of it like when people start working with me, when you turn on a radio and you end up on like an AM station that's just like static, right? And like, oh, that's like not the vibe. I don't want to listen to that. And so I think a lot of times when people find me, there's like a lot of sort of chaos in their field. And the more that I can like work with someone and clear those vibrations and essentially retune you back to the truth of who you are, a lot of the other problems that people experience, whether it's, health issues or, like just a lot of the struggles that I think people have, no matter how well they're doing on the surface. Although, right, to be honest, at this point, like I feel like most people are just like hoping and praying it up down here with like the amount of struggles that people have, whether it's, there's like a really funny meme that I saw a few weeks ago that said something. What was it? It said, "Oh, babe, what's wrong? You don't like pumpkin spice, wartime election, eclipse, hurricane season." And I feel like that really like sums it up. The woman who wrote that is, I love that, and it's like that all the time down here, though, right? Like, since I've been born, I was born in 1979, I'm pretty sure that there's been endless war since I've been in this body. And it just goes back. Like, when has there been a time of peace on Earth?
Well,
At least in terms of what we're told, not really.
Well, there's never been really peace on Earth around the world, but I do remember when and Jim and I are the same age, about 13 years older than you, but we both joined the Navy in the early 80s. And I remember feeling this when I was in high school, that I'm like, hey, when I get out of high school, I'm going to join the military. There's nothing going on. We've never been in a war since Vietnam at that point. So for a good, well, I guess it was only 10 years, but it was from the time I was 9 to the time I was 19, there was never a war. And I didn't ever think the US would ever get any wars. And then the whole 6 years we were both in, there was nothing going on really till 9/11. and then it's been nonstop. And then that's when the takeover began, I think. But yeah, the last 23, 24 years, I agree. It's a never ending state of war. And every one of our presidents except one has started new wars.
Yeah.
I don't understand the whole, a lot of people are talking now about the election stress. And I'm just having a hard time understanding that. I mean, what's the big deal? I mean, pretty much everybody knows who they're going to vote for, the majority. So you go and you cast your vote and you're done. Where's the stress?
Well, I think a lot of people are just concerned that this is probably one of the most important elections of our lifetime, of which
Well, they said that in the last election and the one before that.
Well,
the one before that.
That's true, but the other elections and the other presidents, when Donald Trump got elected 8 years ago, when he came into the office of the presidency, he was used to being the boss, and he was not a government guy. He came in to be the boss. Now, other presidents, Obama, Bush, Clinton, they were in government. So they realized that they weren't really the boss when they were at the top of the food chain. They had to work within and they had to appoint these guys and give these court and play within the rules. But Trump didn't in 2016. And the other, you know who the last two guys to not play the rules and think they were in charge was Nixon and JFK. And look what they did to both of those guys. So to continue on the path we're down from an election wise, I can see why people are stressed about that, because frankly, I'm not really stressed, but I am concerned. So I can see how, to answer your question and not get real political, but I can see how people would be able to feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
And just be stressed out about it, because I think a lot of people believe that if Trump wins, the liberal side of the world is just going to get demolished, and that's not going to happen. The liberals think that way, and the conservatives think, and the MAGA crowd think, that if Kamala gets elected, that the country will just change for the worse, which is what I believe, because she's not going to do any different than, well, she said she wouldn't do anything different the last 4 years. So I'm a little stressed out about it. How would you want to input on this?
So I'm not for I'm for none of the people
I agree.
who are
right about that.
who are on the platform. I think that I think like the simplest, this is another rabbit hole that we could fall down for a really long time, but the shortest way that I feel like I can say this is that I think that if you reach the point, no matter what you're saying, no matter what sort of, good ideas you're espousing, right? Because I think that there are things that a lot of them say, right, that like sound really good on paper. But then when I look at my own lived experience, looking back through every president that I'm aware of that, we've had since I've been on Earth, I don't think any of them have really done anything differently. I mean, I was reading something earlier and remembering, that Trump is the one who fast-tracked the jibber jab, right? Like there are these ways where all of them, from my perspective, are full of it. And I am registered to vote, but as I mentioned to a friend of mine recently, I have maintained my registration to vote so that if I want to vote for myself, I can go do that. Like I am not like none of those, from my perspective, none of them are really for the people. None of them are for the earth and the water and the trees. I think that, there are different, I think that not every bad guy has the same bad guy agenda. I think it's possible, very possible from my perspective that, if you have reached a sort of point of either political or, social status, that you are probably doing things that I am very disinterested in. And that your, the rhetoric and like the ideas that you espouse from like a, sort of creating a sales pitch might sound different and better than the guy to your left. But at the end of the day, to me, I'm like, oh, 1, 2, 3. You are all, from my perspective, ultimately playing for teams that I am not here for. Like that is so that's my that's my take on all of this. And I would also just add, I think there's a lot of like, I think they work everybody into a frenzy every time
For
there's an
sure.
election where they're like,
For
this
sure.
is the most important election that has ever happened. And it's like, I mean, you literally told us that 4 years ago, and then you told us that 4 years earlier, and then you told us that 4 years before. And like, what
Right.
is different? Because I am not impressed with, and it's not to say that there are not things that have been done differently under each administration that perhaps benefited people in small ways. But I think from an overarching perspective, from what I see, if any of these people actually would put their money where their mouth is, as it were, things would already be different. And I also think that these tools that like we've been told we need to be able to like shift and change society, like to me, I feel like we're at a point where I'm like, none of those things that you tell us about how we change society have actually meaningfully changed society from what I'm looking at. And my parents they met as peace activists. Like I was literally out on the streets with my parents when I was in the womb. So I believe, I was raised with a certain like set of values, but even that, I'm like, it just at some point, all of it feels meaningless.
And there's definitely not a political party now that espouses those same views that when your parents were around, because now the Democrats, who used to be the anti-war party, are now the most warmongering thing going out there. There's not a war that Hillary Clinton didn't like. And so you're lost politically. I get it. And probably so am I to a certain extent.
And I don't know, to me, like, I believe that like the way we're going to fix this is by all of us going inward and really starting to say, like, what are the unique gifts and skill sets that I bring to the table? What am I really passionate about? What do I give a fuck about? What do I care about? What are the ways that I know that I have a unique perspective, a unique creative lens? Because to me, the innovation and the shifts are going to come from each of us, like embodying and acting in our own lives, and then allowing that wisdom and that creative lens and like innovative way that you were born to shift things, to allow that then once you've like mastered it, as it were, like understood it in some way on your own and lived it yourself, to then allow it to like flow through your local community. And then, for some of us, I think we're really meant to like spread the good word in an even bigger capacity. And I feel like that, to me, at this point, it's like these tools that were said are the tools that are going to change things have not worked.
Nope.
We're in an even like more insane clown worlds than ever before. So to me, it's like I guess like the other thing too is, our intuition, our wisdom, our psychic gifts, all of this magic that we each hold, that I believe we all really hold, like that to me is where the answers are gonna like flow and come from. And like to me, I'm just like, ugh, like get out of here with all of that. Like I don't want to like hear another one of your dumb ads and hear another bunch of the noise that you're blah, 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 blah. Like I'm just like, so I am not, no, none of you are the other thing too that I think is sneaky about all of it is that it also creates this scenario in which we're always waiting for someone else to come save us. No one is coming to save any of us, except ourselves.
I just wrote that same thing down to bring it up. No one preaches except me to my kids, and I'm sure Jim the same, and probably you. Self-reliance and self-responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you screw up, own it. If you are a screw up, then own that you're a fuck up and either fix it or don't. But don't be a victim.
Right.
Don't blame someone else. Don't blame government didn't give me a check or my minimum wage is too low. Own it. Own your shit. Mm-hmm. And once people can be accountable for their own actions and their own lives and lifestyles and situation in those lives, then I think we're all better off. But the coddling, I'm pretty much out on all that. and I'm totally with you as far as you have to own your own stuff, because if you have that victim mentality, guess what? Where you're always going to be a victim until you just decide to own it and take accountability for your own lot in life, so to speak.
So true. And if you look at the last 20 years with the political changes, what's happened, I mean, you're absolutely right. Nothing's gotten better in agriculture, in medicine, and I mean, there's been improvements, but the systems are broke. Education's broke, agriculture's broke, healthcare is broke, the food distribution chain, it's all a mess. And it's not getting better because we keep voting. Let me finish. Because we keep voting for the same people in the same two parties with the same ideas run by the same corporations. Until people quit voting for the lesser of two evils,
but that's not
it's
gonna
never going to
that's
change.
but
Never.
but that's not gonna until we just decide to not vote with our dollars for all
Yeah,
the shit
I
that
agree
they
with that.
sell us. It won't change.
Mm-hmm.
That's when, because the market always wins. You know, if electric cars weren't viable, they wouldn't be viable. I don't think electric cars should have a $7,000 tax credit on them.
I thought we were going to have a deep spiritual conversation. It's getting really political.
No, but okay, no, we are getting a little off. But what it gets back to is being self-reliant. I think that's what you
Yeah,
we're kind of taking over this conversation, leaving Andrea out in the woods. But it seems like that's what you espouse to people, is being self-reliant, taking responsibility for yourself, and just get off the victim bus if you are on it.
Yeah, and just finding new ways of being, right? Like I feel like for so many people, when we started off, we were talking about, the sort of the skepticism, right? About the metaphysical and the intuition and the psychic gifts and things like that. But to me, all right, so when this is something I think about a lot. I'm a real constant deep thinker about everything. And when the events in September of 2001, and I don't know, I don't want to get you guys dinged, so I'll just, allude to what I'm talking about. We all know what I'm talking about. When that happened, I had just graduated from college. I was doing AmeriCorps, which is, I was ironically working for the government doing national service. And I just started at the very beginning of September. And then, 11 days later, this event happens. And I remember watching it on TV, and I could literally see, like, truth has a frequency to it. And I remember watching the news, because we know, like, when it happened live, it was you could not escape it. It was everywhere. And I remember watching what they were telling us had happened on the news. And I could, like, literally see with my, like, psychic lens and my third eye, as it were, that the narrative they were telling us was not the truth. I'm not saying I knew what the truth was, but I am saying I could literally see, like, the vibrations were bullshit.
The vibrations of bullshit.
I then go and I say, we know a lot now, like, I would imagine many of the people listening to this podcast are people who have perhaps fallen down many a rabbit hole about what actually happened at that point. And I would say it seems very evident that whatever the official narrative is not what really happened. And so I've always had, and then we were having, like, a team meeting that day just to come together as a group and process and talk about what had happened and all these things. And I, like a freaking rube, I'm like so sweet, so innocent, so honest. I looked at everybody who, my coworkers, and I was like, so I literally said this out loud. I was like, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I was like, because, when I'm I'm like, we had the TV on in the room, and I remember being like, I don't think that what they're telling us happened is the real story. Like, I feel like there's some disinformation that we're being told. And, like, to me, this does not make sense and does not, like, this does not feel right. And I remember everyone, like, looking at me kind of like I was like, oh, okay, no, I see. No, we're doing this. I was like, okay, no, this is like, all right. And then, I think someone was probably like, what are you even like, what are you like? Everyone was like, like, I was like, okay, so I'll just leave that alone, I guess, because we're just collectively doing this.
When they found one of the hijackers' passports on the sidewalk like the next day, that didn't convince you that everything was exactly as they said?
and then if you think about it, right, if you keep going, right, with like this ability that I think I have cultivated and perhaps was born with, to be able to like see the frequency of truth, when the events of 2020 rolled around, I was like, oh no, this is literally the same thing. And you know, there were obviously many events in between, but to me, right, like I have always cared about honing my spiritual gifts, my divine wisdom, my ability to really like connect to my own supernatural powers, as it were. And these powers that I have proven to be very a big blessing, especially when a time like 2020 rolled out, where a lot of people didn't know their ass from their elbow and could not figure out what was real and what was not, and what was going to actually help them and what was like absolute chaos and nonsense. And so to me, when I like reflect back on the arc of my own life, my spiritual gifts and my intuition has been the biggest blessing, because it literally, I know when something is hinky garbage and it's not to say that I'm always perfect, I know everything and I've never made a mistake or been a dumbass, because that's also not true. But but I think at the end of the day, the big things, right? The things where I'm like, will, for example, the jibber jab help me? Or will it potentially be an agent of chaos that is meant to hook people into a system of constant illness? I immediately knew that it was nonsense, and that from my perspective, that it was not something that I would ever want to engage with. And I knew that because of because I've cultivated, right, my inner wisdom. And so to me, it's like the things we have at our fingertips at this point, if we want to like cultivate our gifts, really like start to like lean into these, you know, these intuitive ancient ways that I think we were all essentially blessed with, that the system of chaos has essentially worked very hard to suppress in us. And I also think that, you know, I think that there are, yeah, I don't know, it's like time for something way better. Like I
Yeah.
want to leave this planet with like having made as much of an impact to like prison break everyone as possible. So
Yeah.
Well,
So,
you have to go to war against, I mean, what happened in 2001, 9/11, and then again with COVID, you know, there was a collective mentality, a mass hysteria, or what did they call that? Where everybody's on the same, uh,
collective consciousness.
like hypnosis,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah.
mass hypnosis. Yeah.
mass hypnosis. And, you know, frankly, I was that guy in 2001. I had just been out of the Navy 10 years. I was still in my 30s.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm joining back the military. If I would not have if I didn't have a 10-year-old daughter, I would have rejoined the military to go back at it, because I was one of those guys that didn't see that. Fast forward 20 years to the COVID stupidity, and that never phased me. I saw through that bullshit from day one. I was never taking a shot. Their masks were stupid. Their 6 feet mandate. It all was what it was, and it all is what it is. Yeah, and you know they're bringing that stuff back in California.
Oh, are they?
In healthcare facilities, mask mandates and healthcare facilities in like 15 counties across California. So it's all coming back around again. And it's just going to be a matter of time before they start trying to spring it out. But the rebellion that will happen this next time, they won't be able to do it again like they have done it in the past.
People are cheap, man.
Not this quick to each other. Maybe if it was 20 years again, maybe, but
Yeah.
not bang bang like that. So
So,
but
go ahead.
that collective mentality is really powerful, and it's so hard to go against it
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
It's very hypnotic, and it's interesting when you get really into like the history of some of the government sanctioned mind control experiments that they've done on the people. It's very curious to think about how hypnotic, and you know, we've got the phones and the Wi-Fi and the radios and the TV and the television, right? Like there's a story about how one of the people who invented TV didn't even let his kids watch television because he was like, this is like mind control. And so I think we are, I have so much compassion for people who have been really snookered by all of this bullshit, because they are really coming at us from so many different directions. It's like they just are like constantly working all of us into a frenzy. And I think there's another really important part of all of this to me that I feel like, you can't like I can't look at like the events of September 11th or something like what happened with in 2020 without also acknowledging that I think a lot of this also ultimately comes from like a collective fear of death, right? Like people are like always trying to come up with some way to basically like outgame the game. And it's like, you're in a human body. You're going to leave this planet at some point. It's like literally the only definitive thing that any of us can really say. Like, we will all die. And I think that one of the other things from just like a chaos monkey perspective, and part of the way that I think they like hooked people, especially in 2020, is a lot of people are so scared about what that means. They've never really processed it. They've never like owned the fact that they are an infinite being who has like a connection to the divine and like a spark of like creative magic, and have not like faced the grief and the pain that they've experienced when they've had loved ones die, or and face their own mortality. And I think that that is like one of the many different ways that they really like get people, right? Like we don't talk about that as a culture. We pretend it's not a thing, and maybe people like explore it or talk about it, with like a priest or a rabbi or something, but like as a general rule of thumb, it's like duh. And I feel like if we could like acknowledge like we are infinite, we are really, whatever we've been told is really, the truth is really different than any bill of goods we've been sold. And if we can really start to like get serious with ourselves about that. But it's it's a big can of worms. Like, I get why people want to try to jab their way out of it, which again is impossible, but
Absolutely.
yeah.
Hey, when you were getting those feelings and during 9/11 and watching the TV or anything, were you getting any psychic ideas of what? I mean, you knew it was a bunch of crap, what you're being told. Were you getting any feelings on what was really happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would say that from like a world stage perspective, from what like the way that I perceive things, and in terms of like the information that I received at that time, like I think that these big events are very likely orchestrated to essentially create fear and chaos.
And control.
Yeah.
And a
And,
reason to go
and
to war.
control.
Yeah, and a way of essentially being like, oh, there's a problem. Here's a solution to the problem that we literally created. But here are a bunch of solutions. One of the solutions is we're going back to war. Another solution is that we're going to take away a lot of rights from all of you. But don't worry, guys, it's for your own good. And it's just, it's like this, like this, like we're going to create a problem, and then we're going to come out here with our jazz hands and our tough talk about, oh, we're going to Operation Warp Speed. We're going to jab our way out of this problem that we've created again. Because to me, it's just like a lot of this stuff feels very orchestrated. And there's a lot, I mean,
all orchestrated.
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence that corroborates what I, tune into.
Well, all the truthful evidence does.
Yeah. But getting to people to actually listen to it or believe it, it could be so difficult. They just think you're a loony conspiracist.
It's much easier to fool a guy than to convince him he's been fooled.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Which is also why, I mean, there's a lot happening on this planet.
Well, it's all a big control. It's a big control structure. And what you said about wars, and really the war machine is nothing more than a wealth transfer and a money laundering operation. Because when they take our money and they use it to kill people that I got no bitch with, but not only do they they give the money to this side, they give the money to this side too. They let them
Yeah.
kill each other.
Oh yeah.
And somehow we pay for both sides of it. And
Literally.
then after they fuck everything up, we go in and fix it. And BlackRock and the big the globalists, really, for lack of a better word, they just suck up the money. And I mean, there was never a bigger transfer of wealth from the middle class to the upper 1% than COVID and the pharmaceutical fiasco and the billions that just went to the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah.
And I think that's another part of the way, right, that they play their game is that they create, not only do they create these like fake problems that need a solution that, you know, they're going to give us through whatever it is that they're offering, but it's also always very interesting to really, to your point about like the transfer of wealth that unfolded during the past couple of years, to really also say like, all right, so they're doing this thing over here. They're like, they're saying that there's this big problem and their solution, but it's like also what are they doing simultaneously while they're trying to like distract us with whatever it is that they're like, here's today's news cycle. Like here's the thing that everybody needs to care about right now, you know. And it's like, okay, but like also what are you doing to the side, like, because that is also always a very curious game.
That's really true, that
Yeah.
you really have to watch that that all the distractions out there while the entire country's getting invaded on the south, or once again billions going to both sides in Israel, billions going to Ukraine, to just, and it's all just a big money laundering thing until we all just say we're going to quit paying our taxes and supporting this stuff, which we won't, because they come at us with guns, right?
Right.
They will literally threaten us with our freedom. They'll come at us with guns and put us in a cage if we don't pay their extortion fee.
But for your own good.
It's for your own good. And just like we're sitting in Jim's nice house here. He bought it 6 months ago. And if he doesn't pay his annual property extortion fee, he won't have it very long. So does he really even own it, or are we just slaves to the system?
Well, and you know, it's interesting because there are like there's this guy, so his name is Brandon Joe Williams, and he talks about he's been a guest on a bunch of like really big name podcasts like in the past like year or so. I was a guest on the Tinfoil Hat Comedy Hour, and I found him through that show too. He was also a guest, and he talks about how to extricate yourself from these systems that you're talking about. I'm not going to try to like get like deeper into what his whole thing is, but he has a free course that you can sign up for. So if you were interested, so because this stuff is all, I really feel like, you know, we essentially, what I think is like most ironic, perhaps not the most, but one of the bigger ironic points is like we're literally the ones who have the power. And we're the ones who create the economy and create the money and create these systems. And it's like there is a point where I do feel like we all have to say, like, I am not participating in your charade any longer. Like, I am going to go and plant a garden and figure out, you know, a way to grow myself some food and maybe share that food with my neighbors and start to really like do things that are, again, like it's time for us to move really differently. But yeah, check his work out if you're interested in like the financial sovereignty aspect of it, because he has a whole system through which you can basically stop doing those things.
Interesting.
Well, so, unfortunately, I do have a day job, so I don't think my employer. I did try one time to say, hey, can you pay me, about 10 years ago? I'm like, hey, Brian, can you just pay me in Bitcoin from now on? Unfortunately, that did not fly, and they still do their 25% extortion out of my check every week.
Yeah.
So knowing all these things and all the problems and the chaos that we've been talking about for most of the hour, energetically, I feel that this can really distort your energetic field because you get worked up over it. It's negative. It's how do you handle that? How do you work with people that are affected by it? Because it could literally affect your health.
Yeah. So I do very like targeted work in people's energetic field to like clear as much of that noise so that what you're left with is, you know, we'll say like the truth of you, the truth of who you are, which again, from my perspective, is that like we all are incredible creator beings. And that again, like the system relies on us. Like we don't need the system that they've created. It's really about us saying, okay, I have you know, okay, so wait, so sorry, I started sort of veering off of how I like help people with that process of essentially disconnecting from, you know, the noise machine. So I have a couple different, so I do single sessions. I do like private sessions with people. I have something that I call a celestial soul retrieval, where we like go really deep for, you know, like 90 to like somewhere between like an hour and a half and 2 hours, where I really like sit with people. It's essentially, in a lot of ways, it's like a shamanic journey. Where I go into people's field, I clear as much of the distortions as I can from their field. And so I have the private sessions that I do. I have a certification program, which is so cool. We're going to be wrapping things up, the first round of it, at the beginning of December for this year. But I teach people future medicine. So I have a future medicine certification program where you can learn how to do what I'm doing. Because it can be a little bit hard for me to be like, oh, this is like what it's like. This is how it works. Like it's very individualized when I'm working with people privately. And
Can I just ask who might
Yeah.
accreditate a future medicine certification?
Oh, I mean, I would argue that there's probably nobody who would, because like the system doesn't want future, like I mean, I suppose that like I kind of think of it as, you know, I think of it as like a metaphysical university in a lot of ways. But
Okay.
I don't think that there's like a regulatory body that exists on Earth
No.
at this point that would be able to be like, oh yeah, okay, here what she's doing over there, that pro wizard, like we
No, I didn't mean it to be
Okay.
smart alecky at
Yeah.
all.
No, I think that's a good question. I didn't mean to like make it like a total joke or act like it was a bad
Right.
question, but I because I do think it's actually a good question. Like I would suspect there's probably no regulatory body that would want to, you know, that would do that. But for me, right, I'm called to teach people how to do these, you know, these meditations, these guided experiences, these journeys, these activations, these very deep unravelings from, you know, the hooks, the cording, all of these like streams of misinformation. And so I felt really called to start to share that with people, and, you know, from my perspective, certify them to the best of my abilities and how to, you know, be a pro wizard.
Well, I was reading some of the reviews on your Facebook page and on your website, and it's, you know, obviously people have results.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm not one to say, hey, this is great or this sucks or whatever. But when I can read or see firsthand evidence, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
It's more so that I'm going to get it from Fox News or MSNBC, which is mostly bullshit. So,
Yeah.
but so I'm all in. Yeah, I'm just cool with all that as long as people are gaining and being helped by however that may facilitate. I'm good with.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
looking at your link tree, there's quite a bit of things that you're doing on your link tree and services that you provide. What's the majority of the work you're doing? Where's the biggest focus?
I would say right now I have three big focuses. One are private sessions with people. So, you know, someone might do just like a soul retrieval with me or a soul exploration. I have a session
What's a
I
soul
call
retrieval?
During the soul retrieval, I do a lot of really intense like clearing of people's fields, so that like any of, we'll just call it the noise that is affecting our ability to be really in tune with who we are. We all have some beautiful soul expression and set of incredible gifts, and like I think all of us have a really innovative lens through which we experience and view this world and other realms too. And so during the soul retrieval, I go like very deep with someone through this process of unraveling them from the ancestral complexities, that bag of rocks that we talked about, just like all of, you know, the noise and the chaos, and really retuning people's energy and essentially retrieving the parts of our own soul that we have never felt safe to, you know, live in alignment with, that for very, you know, I would say all of the reasons we've just been discussing over the past hour, that someone might not feel safe to, you know, be like in tune with your intuition, right? We're taught from every angle that like magic isn't real. And yet another great irony is that the system that professes that magic is not real uses magic. You go into churches, they're speaking incantations. They're essentially, right? They're like spell casting. The presidents going back in time, you can look this up on the Google. You know, Ronald Reagan had an astrologer that he worked with.
No, his wife did. Nancy.
I have read reports that said that he also worked with this person.
Oh,
so I don't know.
but
my point is
sure, no,
that the
I get
system is telling us that this magic, this intuition, this like spiritual capacity that we all hold isn't real, and yet they're literally using these tools themselves. So to me, like the act of a soul retrieval is really going like deep into one's own field of energy and essentially reconnecting you back to your own divinity. And it's wild, the things that people, you know, you guys mentioned that you had like read some of the reviews and the things that people share and reflect back to me after I work with them. And one of the biggest things that people tell me after I facilitate a soul retrieval in particular, all of the work that I do, but particularly the soul retrieval, is that people, I feel like I'm going to like cry even saying it, but people tell me that they love themselves. And I'll tell you what, it is game over once you start to love yourself. Right? When you really love yourself. Yeah, it's like either like old shitty game over, like new game is on, right? Like when you love yourself and you're like, I do not care to hear, you know, the noise coming from this direction and that direction that's telling me that like I'm worthless and useless and that I am measured by my productivity and blah, 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 and all of these things, and that, you know, I don't have an intuition and I don't have a soul and all these things. And it's like if you can get to a point where you're like, I love myself and all my messiness and all of, you know, with all of the mistakes that I've made, with all of the things that I maybe woulda, coulda, shoulda done differently, the shame, the grief. Like, I think that's one of the other things too, is like, as I do these, especially with the soul retrieval, as I retune people's field, it's like a lot of that stuff just gets like, not that you'll never experience it again, right? But it's like you become like fortified in this way where your own energy system is like sealed, and like you have what amounts to like, you know, an energetic like protective armor around you, which I would say is just, you know, our divinity. But it's a process. So yeah, so the single sessions, the certification is the other big one. I really want to teach people how to do this for themselves and for, you know, to integrate this work into their own communities and modalities in whatever way they feel called. And then I also have, I have a monthly like lower ticket. It's, I think, $55 to do a group monthly healing that I have, which is called Future Medicine Monthly. And those are really cool because those are, I do a group healing, but I also, you know, tune into and talk about some of the things that we've discussed here. And,
Is
you know,
this done over Zoom or live, or?
Yeah, I do it over Zoom. I do it over Zoom. So, and I have a bunch of too for, you know, for people who don't have, you know, I know that like working with me can be an investment, but I have a lot of free resources too. I have a freebie, which I call the Miracle Activation, and it has a bunch of channeled healings and like a guided meditation and things. I have I have a YouTube channel that has like lots of videos, and there's a free Future Medicine Healing there too. So I just feel like, you know, there are like a lot of ways that people can connect with me if they're interested, but it just feels like it's time. It's time to really start to move differently, because the old ways do not work.
It's not working. Yeah. We need a
Nope.
new paradigm.
Yep.
Yep. So, I don't know. There's quite a few things I want to say, but we're kind of over the hour. But I'll just ask the question we've been asking a lot of our podcasters recently. Andrea Donnelly, what are you doing to make the world a better place?
This act of sharing future medicine everywhere, in any way that I can. I just feel so called to really help people remember that we are creator beings. We are powerful in ways that the system does not want us to remember, because when we do, it just changes everything. So yeah, so that's when I'm just out here, goofing around, doing spiritual comedy, doing soul retrievals, putting my money where my mouth is in every way that I possibly can, right? Just like doing the things that I can, to remind people, that there's something so much more beautiful. And it's really just each of us saying, like, I do not care for all that noise. So yeah, I feel like I'm like I often like joke that every day I'm not out on the street wearing a sandwich board that says like, wake up, is I guess just another day, but I'm basically doing that, through my
One
work.
at a time.
So yeah.
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 Very good. You talked about how you healed yourself. Do you have another example of it? Someone else that you worked with that's had a real dynamic change, huge shift in their life?
Yeah. I have, my gosh. I worked with someone, so this is not a physical example, like physical health example, but this is an example of someone really reframing their life. So I had a client a few years ago who I worked with privately for, I don't know, maybe I think about 2 years overall, but she's really gifted, she's really creative, she's got some really cool like ways that she shows up for the world that have to do with like, sort of the farm to table aspect of like food and events. And she was working at a job that just it was not it was not lighting her up. It did not. It was, it was, in some ways it was like a good job on paper, but like she really wanted something different. And in the course of our working together, she shifted a bunch of her personal relationships. She left that job. She left a relationship that she had been in that was romantic, that was not actually like very aligned. She ended up moving across the country, getting a new job, moving into a space that met every one of the bullet points that we had talked about her wanting in a place that she moved to. So to me, it's just like, there are so many different ways that I have seen this really play out so beautifully for people. I have a client who I've also worked with for a few years, who is in my certification program now, and she lived in an area a couple of years ago, and this is one of the things I teach people in my certification program, is how to build like protective energy grids around your home and your property. But before she was in the program, she had been a private client of mine, and she lives in a place that suffered a very crazy natural disaster. And when we had started working with each other, and I'm not, one could be like, well, how do you even know it had anything to do with you? And like, I hear that, but what I can tell you is that in her neighborhood, which had been essentially decimated by a natural disaster, her house was safe and in one piece. And there, I mean, she has pictures. And when we started of this, evidence, and when we started working with each other, that's one of the things that I do when I start working with people, is I create these energetic protection grids around people's, home, their property, their land. I'm actually working on building one right now for another client. And, again, like someone could be like, that is freaking wackery, like, how does she know? Like, what are those, blah, blah, blah. And like, I hear all that, but then there are these other ways where, from my lived experience, I started years ago working on building that skill set for myself. And I'll tell you, like, I don't lose power. I have not today. I'm not trying to call that in. But like when, I know, like I lived in New York during, what was it? Hurricane Sandy.
Mm-hmm.
There were our house, we never lost power. I had done like all of that work that I've been talking about in my, in every house I've ever lived in. Not only did we not lose power, but like the blocks around me, we didn't lose power. And there were definitely like downed trees and things. Like I wasn't right on the water in the part of Brooklyn that I lived in. But as I walked around my neighborhood in the in the days after, there were wild things like trees that had fallen, this far away from like crushing a house. And
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, knowing the work that I had been doing to like heal the land, to heal the neighborhood that I lived in, I'm not violating like individual people's boundaries, but certainly everywhere I live, I work with the land. I work on like healing the land and really creating these protection grids for the animals and the plants and the trees. And so from my perspective, I've seen a lot of, we'll call it anecdotal evidence to.
Sure. My wife and I met at a yoga retreat center up in northern Michigan, and there were some very in tune spiritual people up there. And a couple of them were working on creating an energy dome over the 800 acres of property there. And we were driving back from going in to seeing a movie, and the northern lights were just going crazy through the sky. So we thought, well, we'll drive to the middle of the property where it's really dark in this 800 acres, and we'll just sit there and check it out. And we got out of the car and we look up, and all of a sudden these lines, like a dome, just start forming over the property with like an eye in the middle. And it was exactly what these spiritual people were talking about, how they were going to create this dome over the property. But this was something we could literally see with our eyes. And it was just blowing me away. I'm like, this is not northern light activity. This is something way beyond that because of the dome shape and the rays of light coming down in a perfect pattern around the property.
Yeah.
So I can attest to. I've seen things like that.
Oh, that's so cool.
It was really
I love
cool.
that.
Yeah.
And what a special, for you guys, to have been able to like see, right, the energy. I had a crazy thing. I have like a million stories about like times when something wacky happened where, I like saw something about someone like but earlier this year, at the beginning of this year, I was sitting with, I was with one of with an acupuncture practitioner who was helping me with some things, and I was talking about something and I saw light come out of my hands. And I had a feeling that she saw it too. And I turned and I was like, I didn't even say anything. She just said, I saw that. And I was like, okay, cool. Like I saw palpable light just stream out of my hands, but, and that doesn't like happen every day, but I think that like, again, to speak to the fact that like, we have these experiences that cannot be explained through whatever.
We did a podcast early on. I think it was called Bizarre Life Experiences or something like that, where I shared a lot of the things that happened to me through my life.
Yeah.
And going back, I know I didn't hit them all, but I covered a lot of them.
I'm sure you guys have both seen some things, especially having been in the military, right? Like, I mean, there's so much. There's so much. But yeah, I think when most of us really start to like reflect on these things, there are probably things that many of us have actually experienced, which are more metaphysical and supernatural than we might. And I think a lot of people just kind of brush it off and are like, oh, like I didn't just see, an arc of light grids transforming overhead, like there's a way where I think we can very easily dismiss those things. But I think in a lot of ways, as we like cultivate them and start to just trust them and be like, okay, here's like, I have a million stories and evidences that I could like share about it. But I think as we start to like reflect on our own experience, like I think a lot of people probably have experienced more of this stuff than they would necessarily be comfortable admitting.
Probably true.
Yeah.
Well, on that note.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you coming on our show, your time.
It's fun, Andrea.
Yeah, absolutely.
This was amazing. I love this. Thank you guys. This is a really, like I said at the beginning, I just feel like it's really important that we're doing this, that, whether it's virtual or in person, also, I feel like building community right now is like,
oh, for sure,
a vibe. So
Absolutely.
thank you for having me and
Yeah.
for creating this space.
Well, have a happy winter up in the Great White North.
Oh, that's right. You said you're in Philadelphia?
Yeah.
Is it cooling off up there yet?
Yeah. It's actually it's a little bit chilly now, which is
Yeah.
crazy, which is why I'm wearing this big sweater here at 8 o'clock.
It was 68 degrees this morning, and I was chilly too. I get it.
Yeah.
68.
Yeah, it was cold. Cold this morning. All right, Andrea. Hey, thanks a lot. It was
Yeah,
fun.
it was really a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Love to have you back again if you're interested.
I would love that. I feel like we
Cool.
have like 1,000 different things that we could have talked about, so I would absolutely love to come back.
Yeah, this
It'll
easily
be
could have gone on 2 hours.
Andrea Donnelly 2.0.
Yes.
Coming up.
All right. Well,
All right, see you,
until
Andrea.
then, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Peace.
Take care.
Bye.
So if you just listen to this podcast and you appreciate the content and the work that we're doing, we would love your support. Look in the comment section of this episode. Subscribe, rate us, comment. This gets our podcast in front of other listeners. And if you noticed, we don't have advertisers. For the cost of a cup of coffee, you can help keep it this way. Become a supporter right now. We'd appreciate it. I'm Jim the Yogi.
I'm Rick the BeachMan.
Meantime,